Brokeback is seen as being on the longer side of a short story, containing around 15,000 words. To put that in perspective, each Lord of the Rings book has over 175,000 words. A healthy word count for most novels seems to be 70,000 to 120,000 words, meaning there's a lot of content, too much for a typical feature-length film, so obviously changes have to be made to better fit the format. But Brokeback is in this unique state of not having enough content, so a lot had to be expanded upon to make the switch from page to screen. This short story was adapted into a screenplay, which you can find online via multiple sources. The latest draft I could find was from 2003. The film was released in 2005. Taking in all three forms of the story, we can see how it evolves. Key changes that impact the way you interpret different aspects of the story. Brokeback Mountain is a beautiful film, and an important one at that. We see a gay couple that struggles with living in an oppressed state due to the society they live in. It's unfortunately timeless in that way, and in 2005 it was quite controversial. A lot of people of Christian faith denounced the film as disgusting and sinful, saying it was not keeping in line with traditional family values. Fox News tried to tear down the film by pointing out the drop in box office sales after opening weekend, a drop that happens with literally every film released. Hate didn't win in this film's case, as it was seen as a modern classic, a masterpiece, and the fact that it's remained relevant to this day proves that. A few years back, Jake Gyllenhaal, one of the stars of the film, spoke in a Vanity Fair interview where he told a story about being at a screening of the film after it had been out for over a week. Him and Heath Ledger appeared on stage once the film ended to have a Q&A, but the first person to say something didn't have a question. Rather, he just wanted to thank them, saying that he's seen the film 11 times in the last 10 days, and that he just can't stop watching it. Gay representation in media was shallow at the time. A film like this didn't exist before. Its impact on the general public is what makes the film important, getting people to see an oppressed group for who they are. Human beings. In this video, I'm going to be analyzing the film while also comparing what we have on screen to how it was told in the short story and the screenplay. So I'll be talking about the importance of the scenes while also showing how they differed and changed over time, focusing on key differences with an emphasis on story and audience impact. Superfluous differences will be omitted. Stuff like Jack's truck being green in the book but black in the movie aren't important details that deserve to be spotlighted. Rather, I'll be going over changes that I believe influence the audience on a deeper level. If you are a fan of movies and video essays, please like and subscribe to my channel. The short story is written like a classic Western with lots of in-depth descriptions of the landscape. Around 3, they swung through a narrow pass to a southeast slope, where the strong spring sun had had a chance to work. Dropped down to the trail again, which lay snowless below them. They could hear the river muttering and making a distant train sound a long way off. In turn, the film is shot like a classic Western. Wide shots that show the beauty of the land. Static shots of characters posed in a typical cowboy way. The first third of the film is centered around Jack and Ennis's first time together working at Brokeback Mountain. Here the film's goal is simple. Show Jack and Ennis as authentic human beings. From both of them, we get their individual life stories while also seeing them operate day to day. For an audience, this accomplishes us believing that these two are real. They are down-to-earth characters. Nothing from them would make us think that they couldn't exist in the real world. But why is the film doing this? Well, it wants to show these two men as realistic as possible, so when they start having intercourse with each other, the audience views it as equally real. Most people seeing this movie back in 2005 had likely never seen a scene involving two men, or even seen an on-screen gay relationship. Showing these characters as humans first that live life like everyone else is meant to break down any stigma an audience member may have before it turns romantic. Now let's look at the first key difference in story variants. This scene takes place before they've had. Ennis got spooked by a bear and busted his head open. Jack takes a rag and gently touches Ennis's head before Ennis takes the rag for himself, foreshadowing Jack's overpowering tenderness for Ennis later in the film. The screenplay, however, does not show that. Instead it says, Jack removes the bandana from around his neck, wads it up, takes the whiskey from Ennis and pours some into the bandana, raises the bandana to Ennis's forehead. A beat. Jack hesitates, awkward, hands the bandana to Ennis. It's a small but notable different angle for this moment. The script version makes Jack come off as uncertain, like he doesn't know what he wants or doesn't want to show his emotions, even though the core problem of their relationship that we see later on is that Jack knows exactly what he wants, while Ennis is the hesitant one. An interesting thing about the screenplay that's unique from others is its copy and paste attitude towards the original text. Whole chunks are taken word for word, which is interesting when you notice that some of it isn't even filmable. A common rule for screenplay writing is to only write what will be shown on screen. Descriptions aren't the only thing taken word for word, quite a bit of dialogue is too. This is unique because typically dialogue from a book doesn't work for film. The way people talk in books is different from how they talk in movies, and both are different from how people talk in real life. Book dialogue often is rewritten completely for a film, but Brokeback is the exact opposite. Almost all of the lines from the book are spoken in the movie. On to our next difference. Again, before they've had sex, Ennis returns to camp and undresses to clean himself while Jack prepares dinner. In both the short story and the script, Jack looks over to Ennis while he's naked, but the film cuts before that. There's a good chance that they did film Jack glancing over and decided to cut earlier to subvert the audience. You think he's going to look over because you're watching a queer cowboy movie, but he doesn't. It's one of my favorite editing choices of the film. Finally, let's talk about the scene, which also includes possibly the most impactful change. The script says this: Jack, tentative, takes one of Ennis's big hands from outside the bedroll and guides it inside down towards his own groin. Ennis, coming full awake, realizes where his hand is, jerks it away as if he touched fire. As the following action occurs, we pull away to the night landscape, and we only hear the sounds: the belt being unbuckled, rustle of jeans, Ennis spitting, sharp intakes of breath. That aspect of pulling away from the inside of the tent is gone. We do see it, and it's important that we see it. This movie just spent the first chunk of it showing these two as real men. So now it's time to see what some real men do. I'm typically not a fan of scenes in movies, but this is a case where I'm happy it's here because people just need to see this. They need to know that people like this exist, and they are no different from you and I. This scene is something that so many people would claim they never want to see it, and they never want anybody else to see it, which is exactly why they need to show it. You see heterosexual scenes in movies all the time. Heterosexual has become so normalized. What this scene does is break down that stigma in your mind that this is taboo or strange. No, they are just two people that love each other. It's strange to think that not showing it was even considered, especially noting that there are other sex scenes in the film which we see on screen and script. Omitting the one homosexual sex scene while showing heterosexual sex scenes would be a very bad look and would likely have made people upset and feel underrepresented, rightfully so. The next morning, Ennis goes back to the sheep, where he finds one dead and mutilated. Sheep themselves often symbolize innocence, so a dead one means the loss of innocence, and well, both of these men just lost their guy-on-guy virginities. Being a virgin is seen as innocent. Ennis and Jack are no longer virgins, therefore no longer innocent. Sheep also have a lot of religious presence, specifically in Christianity. In the past, lambs were sacrificed as a sign of worship and to atone for sins. Christianity is known to be critical of anyone who's not heterosexual, so this dead sheep should be symbolic of how Ennis and Jack will now be scrutinized if they are to be found out. Homosexuality is a sin, so naturally, a sheep must die to atone for it. I think it's also, simply put, a bad omen. It was their job to keep the sheep alive. The night they have sex, one dies. It sets up their relationship as a problem right away, especially in Ennis's mind. Moving on from sheep, there's a line that's in the book and script, but is made even more powerful when put to film. Ennis and Jack are having regular sexual encounters while going about their business on Brokeback. They are relaxing on a hill together when Ennis says,
"This is a one-shot thing we got going on here.
It's nobody's business but ours."
You know I ain't queer.
Me neither.
The shot doesn't show his face, so we don't see his facial expression and are left to assume. The power of that line is shot up when you don't show us. Now it's a mystery. Was it hard for him to say? Was there something in his eyes that was hiding something? We don't know, making us unsure of Ennis's true emotions. Emotions the audience will be questioning the whole film. Shortly after that scene is their final day on Brokeback Mountain, where a scuffle gets out after Jack accidentally knees Ennis, ending with Ennis punching Jack square in the jaw. In the book, this moment is told to us in a roundabout way. We are told that Ennis punched Jack on their last day, but it's not until the end when we are told why. Ennis finds the shirts in Jack's closet with blood on the sleeves, where we learn that Ennis punched Jack after he got a nosebleed. So we can assume it was a rejection of Jack's aid and affection, which is exactly what we see in the film. Having it be shown to us linearly was beneficial. It's a good moment that works as a dramatic end to this relationship so far. It sets up how Ennis will be throughout the rest of the film, closed off. Now that their first trip to Brokeback is over, we enter their world as two men having to live life after experiencing their own version of heaven. There's a trope in storytelling called the queer utopia, a place where non-heterosexuals are free to do whatever they want without being judged by an outside society. You see this in other stories, like the film Portrait of a Lady on Fire. We have a couple able to live freely without fear of being caught because they are isolated. What I love about Brokeback is that that trope is only the first third of the film. The rest is seeing how Jack and Ennis deal with losing that and constantly battling to get it back. And as we see in this alley scene, it's not going well. This moment is again ripped straight from the short story, but my god does it hit harder visually. It's this moment that convinced me that this story was, in my opinion, meant to be a film. Heath Ledger's performance sells Ennis as a character we sometimes sympathize with and are other times frustrated with. After this, the film speeds through a few things. Both men get married, have kids, attempt to make a normal life. In this chunk of the film, we have another scene. This one with Jack and Lorraine, his future wife. This scene is important to show because it tells us that Jack is likely bisexual. We also learn later that he's been cheating on his wife with some other women.
Kind of got this thing going with the range foreman's wife over in Childress.
So I think it's safe to say that Jack will have sex with anyone. Compare this to the sex scene with Ennis and his wife Elma, where it's implied and confirmed in the book that Ennis prefers with his wife. These scenes confirm their sexuality. Ennis is gay and Jack is bi. With a few years on their respected marriages, Jack sends Ennis a postcard, restarting the spark of their relationship. There's a line in the script that wasn't kept true when they shot it, but I really wish they did. It says that once Ennis sees who the postcard is from, his family fails to notice his excitement. I like the idea of Ennis smiling like a schoolboy at the postcard, while his family stands oblivious. That is a powerful image. Straight into another difference, in the book and script it describes Elma seeing Jack and Ennis kiss, basically saying that while she doesn't directly see lip-on-lip action, it's still clear what they were doing. While in the film, she just straight up sees it. I don't think this makes much of a difference. She reacts the same in all three versions, so this is a change that works just fine. I'm assuming the point of her not technically seeing the kiss is that means there is always a shadow of doubt for Elma. It changes from confirmation to nearly confirmed speculation, but I feel the difference between those two is small enough to be interchangeable. Since we are already talking about Elma, let's discuss her importance in the story. This film is largely concerned with showing us the impact homophobia has on queer people directly. But with characters like Elma and Ennis's girlfriend later, Cassie, we see how homophobia affects everybody. Closeted men like Ennis attempt to live a life they were not meant to live, and cram their true feelings deep within them. This festers and is eventually released externally through anger and closing themselves away from others, leaving their friends and family to become the victim of this behavior. How many relationships have failed and caused turmoil because someone was gay but was too afraid to come out? Living in a homophobic society leads to everyone being impacted, just in different ways. Elma and Cassie had no way of knowing that Ennis was closeted. They were just trying to find love like everyone else. Ennis is only closeted due to his upbringing and his dad proudly showing him the corpse of a gay man that was killed in a hate crime. This one event changed his and many others' lives. This one moment being symbolic of the homophobic society at large. It raised Ennis's fear of being found out as gay to the extreme, virtually making him impossible to be in any other relationship. In fact, in all three versions of the story, Ennis says something that summarizes his entire mindset.
Wait, if you can't fix it, Jack, you got a standard.
Ennis sees no solution to this situation. Even secluding themselves and living together is out of the question. This sentence means that he has already given up trying. He would rather be miserable than risk attempting to live free. And that's horrible, because it's not his fault. The world we are in still sees queer people as an other in society. Ennis is a character that we rarely see in stories. All of his flaws, paranoia, lack of communication skills, anger issues, and more are all a result of the world he is in. You understand exactly why he is the way he is, and find it hard to blame him when he does something you don't like. This statement feels weak, but equally justified here. In the script, there's a line that didn't make it into the film that pokes fun at that statement. Actually, it's from an entire scene that didn't make it into the final film. Before this scene, where Jack and Lorraine attend this ball with LaShawn and Randall, there was a scene of the four meeting. LaShawn and Randall were broken down on the side of the road when Jack and Lorraine recognized them and assumed they were going to the ball as well. Jack offers them a ride and says this in reference to Randall's broken car. "If you can't fix it, then by God, drive off from it. That's my motto." This line is the entire point of this scene existing. It is superfluous to see how these characters meet that are only here for one scene, so I understand why it was cut, but I do wish that they had put this line somewhere else or reworded it to work in another scene, because I think it has a lot of value. Jack and Ennis's disagreement of this statement is exactly why their relationship doesn't work out, and having Jack riff on it like this implies that he doesn't take Ennis's original statement seriously. It also aligns with what Jack does after realizing Ennis and him won't be together. He drives away to Texas to find a wife, then to Mexico to fulfill sexual needs. Moving on from that, let's talk about the exact opposite concept. Instead of a scene that was in the script but not in the movie, how about scenes in the film that aren't in the script? This is interesting because to me that means there's a good chance of there being a later version of the script that has just never surfaced online. Or these were scenes written to fill in some gaps the filmmakers might have seen in the original draft. The first scene that's not in the script is this one, with Ennis and Elma sledding on their honeymoon. It shows them both happy and makes watching their relationship sink hit even harder. It's a worthy inclusion to the film. Then there's this scene at the grocery store that Elma works at. It's also not in the script, even though it's an amazing scene, showing the collapsing relationship of Ennis and Elma while introducing the man Elma will marry after divorcing Ennis later in the film. They killed two birds with one stone, the birds being plot points and the stone being this short scene. The next is actually a scene replaced with something similar. In the script, there's this scene where Ennis, now divorced and dating Cassie, goes to a drive-in theater and watches The Empire Strikes Back. Ennis gets frustrated with the sound quality, they have a little argument, and they drive off. I imagine this was cut for a number of reasons. Not only would this have been annoying for the film studio to get the rights to Star Wars, but it's also just not that good of a scene. It's a bit bland and doesn't show us anything new about these characters. The scene that replaced this is also a date, but it's Ennis, Cassie, and Ennis's oldest daughter, Elma Jr. This to me is much more fun and interesting to see. It feels like Ennis trying once again to live a false life, introducing his girlfriend to his daughter as if she's gonna last, which she doesn't. If there's one thing this scene proves is that this story being adapted to film was likely the best thing to happen to it. It allowed these characters to grow, and as I've talked about, made the story more impactful. Because it's not a novel, where there would be too much to put into film, it's a perfect length short story that had enough substance to carry a feature film, while also having the potential to grow. Let's switch back, comparing specific scenes to the script. This Thanksgiving scene, where Jack and his father-in-law have a masculinity contest, plays out much differently. First, I want to say that this scene seems parallel to an earlier scene where Ennis roughs up some bikers after getting angry with them. Both scenes involve our protagonists being aggressive and seem to be letting off some steam, perhaps another case of bottled up frustrations being emitted externally onto others. It's the roots of their frustration that differs. Ennis's anger comes from living a lie and remaining closeted, while Jack's comes from his love for Ennis and Ennis not reciprocating it. The script has this scene end on a much less satisfying note. Instead of Jack holding his ground against his son watching TV, he storms out of the house after the father-in-law turns it back on. We then get a few lines where he makes subtle jabs at Jack after he's gone. You want your son to grow up into a man, don't you? This is one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, and if it was shot like the script, it definitely wouldn't be. The back and forth pissing contest with the TV is petty and stupid, but feels real because of that. This would just make the audience feel even more bad for Jack, which isn't really necessary. Continuing on with differences revolving around Jack, after Ennis's divorce from Elma, he sends Jack a letter informing him. Jack immediately drives from Texas to Wyoming, thinking this means Ennis and him will finally be together. Jack is then rejected and drives home. In the book, this moment is gone. Having Jack actually make it to Wyoming to meet Ennis face to face is much more cinematic, and again, we feel this rejection a lot more because of it. Just another example of this story working incredibly well visually. Jumping back to Thanksgiving, this time at the divorced Del Mar household. After this awkward dinner, we have Elma confronting Ennis about Jack, making it clear that she knows the relationship goes beyond fishing with each other. The line, "Jack twist, Jack nasty," was always a favorite of mine, and it was taken directly from the book, like most great lines in the film.
Jack twist? Jack nasty.
A difference in this scene from the book and script comes in the form of specific character actions and direction that is noticeably missing in the film. Both mention Elma doing the dishes and how certain actions align with what she's saying. He thought she'd take the pattern off the plate with the scraping, this aligning with the nerves Elma is likely feeling before confronting him. I looked in the case when I got a chance, and there was my note, still tied there, and that line hadn't touched water in its life. As though the word water had called out its domestic cousin, she twisted the faucet, sluiced the plates. These are subtle, but I do think they would have added something here. At the same time, however, I do think the dialogue and performances are enough to carry the scene on its own. It's interesting to me though, since these lines were then copied and pasted into the script, meaning they had the opportunity to make the scene with these things in mind, but opted not to. The sound of a plate being scraped could have added more tension with the release of flowing water, breaking it right before Ennis freaks out. Could have been a clever use of sound design. Another favorite moment of mine in the short story is how it describes Ennis and Jack once they are older. Jack had filled out through the shoulders and hams. Ennis stayed as lean as a cloth pole, stepped around in worn boots, jeans, and shirts summer and winter, added a canvas coat in cold weather. A benign growth appeared on his eyelid and gave it a drooping appearance. A broken nose healed crooked. This gives you a clear visual of these men as real rough cowboys now in their halfway point in life. I think the film attempts to show this, but falls a little flat. They age up the actors using makeup and facial hair for Jack. They opted to cast young and then age them up. Maybe they could have casted older and used makeup to have them be younger in the first third of the film. I'm not sure if that would work either though. I love the cast here, of course, but come on. This description doesn't really match the handsome Heath Ledger, even with that horrible haircut. Other than appearances, however, these characters are true to the ones seen in the short story personality-wise. You get a sense that Ennis is closed off to a dangerous amount, while Jack is a little more open. The only thing they added for the film was Ennis's ever-present paranoia.
You ever get the feeling, I don't know, when you're in town and someone looks at you, suspicious, like he knows? Then you go out on the pavement and everyone's looking at you like they all know too.
This addition feels natural. Ennis is a man that believes being himself is dangerous, because it is. So this anxiety from people finding out his secret is realistic. Exactly what I mean when I say this story grew organically when making the transition to film. Nothing added feels like padding something too small. Instead, they let it become bigger with everything already here. Well, we are finally nearing the end of the film. Onto our last camping trip with Ennis and Jack, where some of the most fascinating differences come to light. The first is a line being changed. Probably one of the most iconic and notable lines in the entire film was changed from the short story and the script. By a fire, Jack and Ennis talk about their relationship, and Jack says,
The truth is, sometimes I miss you so much I can hardly stand it.
It's simple and deeply impactful. Originally, the line was, "Sometimes I miss you so much I could whip babies." The difference is apparent, and while I don't think one is worse than the other, it all comes down to performance. It's hard to not think that this one is a little goofy when compared to what we got. I do wonder whose decision it was to change it. That's what's fun about reading scripts. Seeing changes and imagining how it was transformed. It could have been the actor, the director, a writer on set, who knows? While that line is iconic, it's probably not nearly as iconic as Jack's rant. It's taken almost word for word from the book. The only differences there are slight, and to me come off as a result of performance.
Yeah, we'll try this one. And I'll say it just once.
Go ahead.
Tell you what, we could have had a good life together. Fucking real good life. Had us a place of our own. But you didn't want it, Ennis. So what we got now is Brokeback Mountain. Everything's built on that. That's all we got, boy. Fucking all. So I hope you know that if you don't never know the rest. You count the damn few times that we have been together in nearly 20 years, and you measure the short fucking leash you keep me on, and then you ask me about Mexico, and you tell me you kill me for needing something I don't hardly never get. You have no idea how bad it gets. And I'm not you. I can't make it on a couple of high-altitude fucks once or twice a year. You are too much for me, Ennis. You son of a horse and bitch. I wish I knew how to quit you.
The script has the exact same speech ripped off the page of the short story, but I would imagine it would be difficult for an actor of any skill set to get the exact wording down accompanied with the heightened emotional state. Obviously, I'm not calling out Jake Gyllenhaal, he's a terrific actor. Slight wording changes are common for actors of varying talents. Again, this is something you'll notice when reading scripts. A difference with some meat on his bones is what happens after Jack's rant, that being Ennis's reply.
You son of a horse and bitch. I wish I knew how to quit you.
Then why don't you just let me be, huh? It's because of you, Jack, that I'm like this. Nothing. I'm nowhere. Oh.
This is only in the film, and I find that amazing. This is the climax of the movie. Ennis's reply to Jack solidifies his stance on remaining closeted. It's heartbreaking seeing these two men crumble over circumstances of life. You feel the weight, the desperation. And again, we don't know whose idea it was to have these lines in here. While the short story version ends with Ennis still being upset, he's speechless. That is impactful in its own way, but the performance here makes this dialogue devastating to watch. The short story adds some omnipotent context that is often overlooked when watching the film. "Jesus," said Jack. Ennis? But before he was out of the truck, trying to guess if it was a heart attack or the overflow of an incendiary rage, Ennis was back on his feet, and somehow as a coat hanger is straightened to open a locked car and then bent again to its original shape, they torqued things almost where they had been. For what they'd said was no news. Nothing ended, nothing began, nothing resolved. Immediately after this, the short story goes on to a flashback to Jack and Ennis's first trip on Brokeback Mountain. The film does the same. I was always a little thrown off by this. I understood the parallel of Ennis riding away from Jack, but it still seemed a little off. I could sense I was missing something, and the short story tells us what. What Jack remembered and craved in a way he could neither help nor understand was the time, that distant summer on Brokeback, when Ennis had come up behind him and pulled him close, the silent embrace satisfying some shared and sexless hunger. This is the only moment Ennis showed non-sexual love to Jack. A tender hug by surprise turned memory of a love wanted more than anything. Jack thinking about this moment here cements his mindset about the relationship the same way Ennis's reply cemented his. Jack loves Ennis and refuses to give up on him because of this. We know that Jack has sex with other men, but there's a chance that this is the only moment another man showed him affection without wanting sex. Jack will never lose hope on a life with Ennis, and Ennis refuses to open himself up. The climax of the movie ended in a standstill. Nothing ended, nothing began, nothing resolved. Shortly after this is the scene that reveals Jack's death, a moment taken straight from the short story that I applaud them for adapting, because cinematically it might make more sense to show Jack's death. By show it, I mean in a scene other than the visions Ennis gets. Imagine it cuts from this scene to Jack driving down the road till he pops a tire. We then see a band of locals attack him. That would surely be dramatic and cinematic, but it would also be glorifying his death. I feel like a less emotionally in-tune filmmaker would have made that scene. As we've seen throughout this video, this movie hangs true to the source material. And showing it this way, we feel the sudden heart sink and confusion that Ennis feels. It might seem weird to talk about a scene that doesn't exist, but hey, This is all a bit of fun. The joys of adaptation, seeing how a story could have been told, even if it wasn't told that way. Anyway, without hesitation, Ennis goes to call up Jack's wife to see what's going on. There's a difference here that I don't believe I've talked about yet in this video. A clear distinction from page direction and on-screen performance. The short story describes Lorene as cold, while in the film we get the sense that she has become aware of Ennis and Jack's relationship as being more than fishing buddies. I suppose it depends on how one interprets this coldness in the short story. Could very well mean the same thing. But when I think cold, I think stiff and emotionless. But Anne Hathaway's performance is emotional to tears, not what most people would consider cold. Lorene is of course in a similar boat as Elma and Cassie. Her marriage, from Jack's words,
Lorene's good at making hard deals in the machinery business, but as far as our marriage goes, we could do it over the phone.
It seems loveless and forced. Her learning that her husband was in fact seeing other people behind her back naturally makes her upset. This adultery only occurs because Ennis is too scared to be with Jack, and Jack is overall a promiscuous guy. But either way, if Ennis wasn't afraid to be with Jack, then none of these women would have gotten their feelings hurt. Back to Jack's death. We find out through Lorene that it was an accident. A tire blew up in his face while he was attempting to fix it. This reasoning, however, makes Ennis imagine a scenario that is likely what really happened, that being Jack's death was a hate crime. This is the only time we see a version of Jack's death in the movie, but in the script we get a dreamlike version once Ennis meets Jack's parents. This scene was meant to be inserted after Jack's father tells Ennis about Jack's plans to bring other men up to their house. Flashback, exterior, side of the road, Wyoming, day. We return once again to Ennis's earlier flashback. Scene 89, low angle. Ennis's father leans Ennis and K.E., Ennis's older brother, to the edge of an irrigation ditch. Cameras on their backs and Ennis's father's head is out of frame. As we approach the ditch, we see the toes of two boots appear. 9-year-old Ennis and 11-year-old K.E. look down at what was Earl's corpse in the earlier flashback. We see Ennis, his little boy face, filled with horror. Then, unlike the earlier flashback, we pan up to the body in the ditch, but the bloodied face is not Earl's, it is Jack's. I think this was removed for a few reasons. For one, it destroys the pacing of this conversation, and two, it solidifies what happened to Jack. I don't believe the filmmakers wanted that, and my proof is the fact that this scene is missing. They must have wanted the audience to pick whichever ending they wanted. Did he die in a horrible hate crime, or was it an accident? You decide. Well, the book is not that generous. Again, directly after Jack's father speaks of his late son's plans, reread this. He's gonna split up with his wife and come back here, so he says. But like most of Jack's ideas, it never came to pass. So now he knew it had been the tire iron. This whole spiel that Jack's dad goes on tells us that Jack was much more brazen about his sexuality, and it made it easier for people to take note of his homosexual tendencies. Ennis knows this about Jack, or at least assumed it before and knows after this conversation. This line about the tire iron tells us this. If Jack was so comfortable telling his parents about his pretty obviously homosexually charged plans, then he definitely wasn't so paranoid as Ennis, and made the likelihood of other people finding out much higher. Therefore, the probability that his demise was the result of a hate crime is equally high. The saddest part about this is that it proves Ennis right. His paranoia and self-isolation was a success. He didn't want to end up like Earl, and he didn't. This is a rare case where our protagonist doesn't change. Ennis starts off miserable and overly reserved, and decades later at the end of the movie, he's the exact same. I talked about character arcs in my video about Back to the Future. To put it simply, if a character doesn't have an arc, then the film has to compensate in some way or another to make the film satisfying for an audience. This film works because Ennis's lack of change is justified and stemmed in reality. The audience won't question it, or likely even notice that he lacks change. But as we'll see in the final moments of the film, perhaps there is a small bit of change within him. Here is the final scene. When Elma Jr. tells Ennis she's getting married and he agrees to go to the wedding, Ennis prepares some drinks to celebrate, this being some white wine. This is a cute detail mentioned in the script. Ennis stands, takes a half-empty bottle of cheap white wine from the fridge, a legacy of Cassie. That is such a small thing that I'm impressed was held true when they filmed it. It's something nobody would notice, but it also makes sense, because why else would Ennis have a bottle of white wine? Up till now, we've only seen him drink beer or whiskey. After Elma Jr. leaves, Ennis is alone again. He goes to his wardrobe and opens it up to the postcard of Brokeback Mountain joined with Jack in his shirt. The script has some added scenes of Ennis buying the postcard, a reasonable cut. It's more impactful if he already has it, plus we don't need to see how he got it, we can assume he bought it somewhere. The book describes the shirts as such: the pair like two skins, one inside the other, two in one. Then Ennis says,
Jack, I swear.
a line once again taken directly from the book. "Jack, I swear," he said, though Jack had never asked him to swear anything, and was himself not the swearing kind. What he was swearing to is up to interpretation. Normally this would be something I would try to figure out, or propose an idea of what it could be, but I think it's best we all have our own answer to that question, because I don't think we're supposed to know. Like the book says, Ennis had never done this before, so maybe it's the fact he's swearing at all that's important, rather than what he swore to do or be. This is one of my favorite line deliveries of all time, partly due to the elusiveness. A plea to a ghost from a man exiled and alone. The final shot of the film, we see the postcard before Ennis closes the door. Our attention is drawn to the window. A flat, typical-looking landscape lies there, a stark contrast to the beauty of Brokeback Mountain, a beauty that Ennis can now only see in a postcard. The land around him, as the script describes. He looks out the window at the great bleakness of the east northern plains. The short story ends with Ennis's life motto, telling us that he plans to live by that forever. There was some open space between what he knew and what he tried to believe, but nothing could be done about it, and if you can't fix it, you've got to stand it. At the beginning of this video, I said I wasn't going to bring up any differences I thought were superfluous, but in this scene, the short story clearly says that Ennis's one nice shirt is white with wide black stripes. Then in the film, it's white with thin blue stripes, and that really bothers me.